my grandfather was a carpenter, and he built houses, you know, and then my grandmother, of course, she was a gardener, a big gardener, and everything else at the house, and they had two children, and one of them was my father, and the other one was his sister, and that was my Aunt Ella. His sister lived in the next block, and we lived in the block after that. Okay. So that was 1, 2, 3 blocks total. All of us lived there, and so and of course I was born in Florala, Alabama, and so my daddy was born over in South Alabama, over east of there, you know. Yeah. And then but he and of course my mother was born there in Florala.
That needlepoint just to the right of the entrance to the kitchen, which house is that?
That house there?
Yeah.
My mother and father lived in that house.
Wow. Okay.
And my grandfather was here, and a block down the street was my Aunt Ella, and we were the next one, and then and the next block was this house right up there. Now my father was he was a great hunter, and he demonstrated for the Winchester Arms Company, and yeah, but that's when I told you that I would go with him and light the matches. You know, he would light the matches, and then of course they would take a turkey and they would tie it down behind a log out there, a couple of 100 yards away, and then they in turn would allow the people that were attending this particular little demonstration, they would allow them to see if they could shoot the turkey in the head. Okay. The turkey would come up, look over the log, and then they'd shoot and see if they could kill the turkey.
Okay.
If they killed the turkey, they got the turkey.
Okay.
And it was all at Thanksgiving, or right close to, or maybe the day before Thanksgiving, and then none of them could hit it, but Daddy, being a crack shot and an expert shot, and he would kill the turkey, and and then of course the deal of that I would set the matches up in we had a little porch around a barn there. A lot of times in the country they had a little porch around part of the barn, covered over, and of course it was planks that had flooring in it. And then he would take me now. We took stick matches, and then he'd get them out, and he'd tell me, now don't put them straight up, lean them back a little bit. And so he said, that gives me a little better angle to hit them, to light them. And then he in turn would go back over the edge of the porch and with a 22 rifle, and then he would light all 16 of the matches. Now, you know, I mean, a lot of people never heard of anything like that, you know. I always made an impression on me. And then we moved from there when I was about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years, about 1925. Yeah, we moved to Florida, and and then Daddy worked for, he worked for, he had a barber shop there for a short period of time, and then in Winter Garden, and but he got out of that and got into the wholesale citrus fruit business.
Okay.
I mean, I'm talking about oranges, tangerines, and grapefruit, and he would ship those boxcar loads of them to Atlanta, Georgia, and then he would go up there at the curb market, and he would sell that to all of the various vendors that wanted them, and I went up there with him one time,
Mm-hmm.
and did I tell you that story?
Tell it to me again, please.
All right, and I went up there with him one time, and he stayed in a boarding house on the second floor, and which was close to the curb market, and he left me there, and he went on down to take care of his business, and I woke up, and there was a little balcony there in that bedroom, and it had snowed the night before, and I'd never seen snow before in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd seen ice, but not snow, and so I opened up the little door going out on the balcony out there, and went out and got me a handful of it, and see what it tastes like. Those little things that don't mean a hell, don't mean a thing in the world, but they are an experience that I had that I remember very well through my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I finished the grammar school in down there in Winter Garden, and we moved from there over to Orlando,
Mm-hmm.
which was only 14 miles away. And but we moved over there, and then I went through junior high school there, and also senior high school, and
Buddy Ebsen, the guy who played Barnaby
yeah,
Johnson.
he lived in Orlando there.
Yeah.
He and his sister both lived in Orlando, and their father, Mr. Ebsen, had the Ebsen School of Dance,
Okay.
and he would teach all the young girls in high school to dance, and he in turn would get some of us boys to come over there that could dance, and we would dance as their partners to teach them how, and etc. And he paid us, I don't know what it was, maybe 25 cents or something like that, but it was that was a lot of money then. I got out of school, and then I wanted to go somewhere where you could get a job, and while I was in school, in high school, and in the summertime, and on the Saturdays and so forth and so on, I worked in a print shop, and I became a printer, a journeyman printer, and so I got that, and then so I came up to Memphis, Tennessee, and got up here in 1939, and so I was looking for a job, and so one of the guys I knew had a friend and who worked at E.L. Bruce Lumber Company, and he was a printer, and so told me to come out there, that they needed somebody to help,
Mm-hmm.
and so I went out there and got the job, and then I worked at E.L. Bruce there for quite a while, and then there, and I think I left Bruce there, and when the active part of World War II went on, and they were building a big Army depot base in town, and in Orlando, no, I mean in Memphis, out here. It's the one out there on the way to the airport. And they were building that one. And so the manager of a company that sold printing equipment, presses and so forth and so on, they were looking for somebody to come out and run the printing department out there for the government. And so he recommended me, and I went out and they gave me the job, and so then I moved out there, and then I started. I met my wife when I was working out there, and she had finished college down at Sophie Newcomb, Tulane, and I was there, and so I met her across the street from where she lived, and at a little party that one of the girls named Eleanor Ham was having, and she, a girlfriend of hers, I don't even remember her name, but she invited me to come to the party, and I met Jane at that party, and then we liked each other and got together, so on and so on, started dating, and that was in let's see now 40. That was in 41, and we went together in 42. And then, we got married in May the 21st of 1942. And then it wasn't long before it was, I was drafted into the Army, and she came over to Virginia, and while I was in training, and got a job there at an Army depot there, but then I was being called to come in December, and around December the 1st. And so she went home to Memphis that year before I left, and then I in turn went from there on up to training in service, and from there on into New York, and then from New York to England. Mm-hmm. And we went in England to Liverpool, in the northern part of England, and went up to Iceland and back down, and between right in the northern part of England. And we were there in the latter part of 40. Well, not much, because we got there in December. In December of 43. Three. December of 43, and then we went on down to Southampton, and we moved down there, and be ready to go into across the English Channel into France. And then when D-Day came along, well, we went on over to Normandy, and was there, and then from there on up to northern France, and then from France on up to the Battle of the Bulge, and in the meantime, my wife Jane had gone home and found out that she was pregnant, and so she had birth, and my daughter Charlotte was born in Memphis, and they couldn't get hold of me to tell me about it until September, because things were moving pretty rapidly at that time, and so then I stayed over in Europe and traveled around Europe, and after the war was over, in France there and Germany, and then they shipped our outfit down to Marseille, France, and we were waiting to get on board a carrier, and it would take us over to the Japanese War, and then that's when they bombed Japan, and Japan gave up, and so instead of sending us to Japan, they loaded us all on the same boat and sent us to Boston, and took over to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and were discharged over there. And I got home on the 23rd day of December of 1945.
Wow, just in time for Christmas.
I made it for Christmas, yeah, and that was the first time that I saw my daughter, and but I had brought a dog. I like dogs, and I had bought a Doberman Pinscher in Germany, and I had the pedigree on it for 22 generations.
Wow.
And so I bought the dog, and I was going to raise Dobermans when I got home. But when I came in on the train, and then got the dog and went out to meet my wife, and so got out there, and we got in a taxi, and she said, "What are you going to do with that dog?" I said, "Put it in the trunk of the car." She didn't like dogs, so I told the taxi driver, "Open up your trunk." He opened up and told Gretchen, that was the dog's name, was Gretchen, and so and I got, it was a bitch dog, and then I got it in the trunk, and we shut the trunk, and then he in turn took us out to Jane's father, Dr. McIntosh, and we lived there for a short period of time, and then we went to Florida to see my parents, and took the dog with us, and so we got down there, and she said, "You can get rid of that dog now." It was a big dog. A Doberman's a big dog.
Dobermans have a reputation as being a little mean.
Oh,
so.
well, they're a little mean, but I mean, you don't fool with them.
Yeah.
But I mean, they don't just get cuddly and all that stuff. That got us through that period, and then came on back and went back out to where I had worked before I went into service, and found out that International Harvester Company was moving to town, and so I wasn't in the printing business any longer, but they had me in a position out there, and I had a service job as a safety engineer, and with the government, and so the guy that had recommended me for the job. He was selling all the printing equipment and etc. To Harvester out there, and so I had met him when I was dealing with the printing, and so as I say, I went on out there from being the safety engineer there to being one out at the Harvester Company, and I stayed with the Harvester Company during the construction period, and all the dyes and all of the various things where people had to reach in and out and so forth and so on. And so I went on to school and down at the University of Tennessee, and finished my training in engineering, and so then I was out at Harvester out there, and went until 1951, and 52, but then we had I had the medical department, and all that was under me because of the accidents that would occur there, and so we had to have a surgeon and also a doctor for examining purposes, and my wife Jane's father and Dr. Warr, W-A-R-R, they were the same age, and they practiced medicine in Memphis, and Dr. Warr had a son, and his name was Otis Warr, and Otis Warr Jr., and so I met him. He came out there to do some work and wanted the job out there as the head of the medical department for the Harvester, and so I recommended him and got him there. And then later, a year or two later, he had a patient, which was he was in private practice, of course. He was just a part-time situation out there, but he had a patient, and that patient was a man named Mr. White, Elmer White, and Mr. White was in the stone business, and he was getting quite old. He had come down from the Nashville area and into Memphis to do some work for various people, including Clarence Saunders here in Memphis. And but he started the business here in Memphis in 1908, and then so there it was. We were this was 1951. So he was interested in getting somebody coming into his business because he was getting old. So he was a patient of Dr. Warr, and Dr. Warr recommended me, and so I went down and got together with Mr. White, and so we set up a corporation called the White Stone Company, and he had 50% of the stock, and I had 50% of the stock, and with the option to if either one of us died, then the other one had the opportunity to buy the interest. Well, I thought he would live a long time after that because he he was old, but he was in good health. And so I quit Harvester and went down and went to work for the White Stone Company. And that was in February of 52. And so he died in June of 52. So I hadn't been there long, but anyway, so I bought his interest in the operation, and so I got that, and then with that, we continued to work, and I kept expanding it and getting different things going, and and started doing a lot of major buildings because there were big buildings being built then, and those buildings, like the Light, Gas, and Water building downtown, and the Federal Reserve Bank downtown, and all of the Sears buildings here in town, and just numerous large buildings, Goldsmiths, big building out east out here, and so that went on, and so we grew and grew and grew, but then we had Jane and I had two sons, and my son John was born in 46. My son Robert was born in 47, and then so that gave us two boys and a girl, and then we moved, and the company had gotten larger, and so they in turn were getting bigger, and so we moved from the house we had, small house we had over on Swan Ridge Circle, and we had enlarged it to take care of 5 people. I mean 5 children, and so we had two other boys that were born after that, and so we moved to where we live now, which is here, in 1960.
When you were choosing this house to live in, when you were looking for a bigger place to live, how did you pick this house?
Well, a friend of mine was in the real estate business, and his name was Kyle Tapp. And anyway, and he had a partner in that business, and his partner was developing this whole subdivision where we live now. He told his partner that I was looking for a house, and well, he said, "Come out and look at that one of mine. I'll sell it, you know. I can build another one." And so with that, we came out, and Jane looked at it, liked the house, and so we in turn bought this house, and it was not a giveaway house, but I thought it was a good buy, and I liked the area here, and I knew the town was growing in this direction, and so paid $42,500 for the house. I was over in Chattanooga. We were doing a big job in Chattanooga, and I had to go out to the contractor's office, and he was taking me out through his warehouse to show me something, and I saw these animals there, the aluminum animals, and I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, I had those left over from this park that I did out here in town," and so on. I said, "Well, would you sell them? And he said, yeah. How many you want? And I said, well, I don't need but 2, but yeah. He said, I'll sell them. And so I bought them from him, and he crated them and shipped them here to the house here at Memphis, and then I put them up and put them in place. Well, I had been active in Boy Scouts of America all my life, and so I was active in as they were coming up, and I got them involved in the scouting deal, and so John and Bobby both were in the Scouts, and then that was that. And then we did a lot of fishing together, and take them fishing, and just so that they would learn how to fish. And then my family, my daddy and my mother, they lived in Orlando, and then my sisters lived up in Jacksonville Beach, and so we spent a lot of time coming and going back forth to Florida so that I could see my parents and my sisters, and I could show my children to them. They could get to know them too. And I remember we'd go in, and we'd be going out to Jacksonville Beach out there, and they all lived out in that area along the beach. And when I'd go there, and the first thing we would do would be to drive down on the beach in the car, and get out and let them go out and wade in the ocean, and they really enjoyed doing that. So every year when we would go down, they wanted to do the same thing again, and then we would go on to the house, and so we bought a house down there, a 2-story house, and it had 2 apartments in it, large, right on the ocean front. And my sister, Cotton, she lived there, and then my daddy would come, his mother would come up there and spend some time, and then Daddy died not long after that, maybe a couple of years, and when he did, well then we moved my mother from Orlando up to Jacksonville Beach, and she didn't like Jacksonville Beach. She didn't like the ocean and the wind and everything else, and so she in turn got her a house, a trailer, house trailer, being not a trailer, but a house trailer. It was one of those little things that you had a kitchen and you had bedrooms and all that in it, and so she got one of those and moved away from the beachfront over closer to where my sister Massa Lee lived. She moved back to Orlando, and so she lived down there until she died. And so, and Daddy is, my father, Daddy he's buried there in Orlando, and so is my mother. And but that pretty well shapes up my early part of my life, and then of course I came up here, and I was living here already, of course, and we had this house, and I got very active in the American Legion, and as a Legionnaire, because having come back from service, and then I met several people that were influential in the Democratic Party, and and one of them, of course, was Mr. Bates, you know, and so through him, I got involved in Democratic politics, and worked at that and all through the days of Frank Clement, and after him, all the successive governors that were Democratic governors until that happened. That went on for years and years, for 20 years, and and by that time, of course, my sons John and Bobby had both gotten grown, and then we were still in the stone business, and so I got them into working at the stone company, and Bobby was he was a good mechanic, and his Marine Corps training had been quite extensive, and so he in turn worked in the fabrication plant of the company, and John went as an Air Force, and he got hurt in a training accident, and he was out, and so he was in sales, and then my son Will, he was an accountant, and so he had already he'd finished his training, and so he kept all of our books and did all the office management. You can imagine that, and then and Richard didn't want he didn't particularly want that be down there. He was working as a draftsman in another company, and but the three of them, and so Will left, and he went on to become a certified public accountant, and then that left Bobby and John there, and then so there were times where they didn't think that they really wanted to be in that, and so we'd already had set up a corporation, and then each one of them owned a third of the business. Bobby, his training, of course, before he went in the Marine Corps, he was over at Columbia Military Academy, and so he was, and so was Will. Will and Bobby both went to CMA, but anyway.
Why did they go there? Why did you decide to send them to military academy? Why did you decide to send Bobby and Will to the military academy?
Well, it was a real good school, and it was a military academy, and I thought that the discipline would be a good thing for them, and it was, and so. But anyway, that was the end of that, so then Bobby he bought them out, and then he changed the name from White Stone Company to Barden Stone Company, and which is where he is now.
So it was actually Stone Associates when the three of them took it over. It was Stone Associates when the three of them were running it?
Yeah, it was called Stone Associates. It was White Stone, Stone Associates, and then Barden Stone.
Right.
he was selling to contractors that were doing these other things, just like I had been doing.
Okay.
And but he didn't. He had gotten pretty well out of the precast end of it,
Okay.
and it was nothing but stone.
I remember Mom telling me a story about parties down on a boat y'all had down on the Mississippi, where y'all actually owned a boat and y'all had parties down there. Can you talk about any of those?
Yeah, I like boats and I like the river, and so I had a Chris Craft, a big Chris Craft. I think it was 36 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah, 36 feet long, and it had the forward cabin or the forward beds in there under the hull, and then had a separate deal on the back side, and had a little balcony on top of that, and then a little balcony out behind it, and then the central part of it, of course, was big enough where you could make the kitchen area, table, all that, drop it down and make a bed out of that. So we had enough room in there for everybody to have a bed. And so we spent a lot of time with it, and out on the Mississippi River. And my wife Jane, she didn't like the river, but
she didn't swim, so that was
she didn't swim.
She didn't want to be on the water.
She couldn't swim, and she had never learned how to swim, and but anyway, we finally got rid of that, and bought that place over in Hot Springs.
What was the place
that
in
apartment.
Hot Springs?
Huh?
An apartment, you said?
Yeah, it had a condominium over there in Hot Springs.
Okay.
And it had 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, so it was large, and up on the 10th floor, and right out on the lake. So we spent a lot of time there, and with the kids, and everybody coming and going. Had a boat, you know. Most of it was a little ski rig, fishing and skiing.
So the kids like water skiing?
Yeah, well, and not only that, but there was a horse, horse racing deal there. Well, we spent time going back and forth to see the horses run, and which was just a few blocks from where the condominium was, and so we spent a lot of time on the weekends coming back and forth and going over there, and she'd go over there sometime and stay more than a week, and and take the kids with her in the summertime when they weren't in school. So it was an interesting time, and then of course that lasted for a while, and so finally we sold it, and came on back to Memphis and been there because we'd go over there every weekend, and so that didn't work out, and well, it worked out fine, but I mean, we got over it and through it, and came back to Memphis, and all this time the stone business was growing, and we were doing all kinds of work there, and finally everybody got married, and had 14 grandchildren, and then their children, their 14 had 18 grandchildren, and here we are now, with
a lot of kids and grandkids.
About 50 people in the backyard when they come over here for the 4th of July. I was then a distributor for the Cold Springs Granite Company, and also the Evans Limestone Company in Indiana, and so I worked on major buildings in Chattanooga and Nashville and of course over in Knoxville, the university there, and then in Memphis and down in Birmingham, and then Little Rock and Tulsa and Oklahoma City. And so I would make those trips out of town, and I'd have to be gone for at least one night, and so sometimes 2 nights, but generally it was just I'd leave early in the morning and I'd drive to Nashville and be up there by 8:30. I'd work in Nashville there, and then the afternoon I'd go on from there to Knoxville, and then I would either spend the night in Knoxville or drive back to Chattanooga and then work there the next day and then drive home that afternoon. I did the same thing from Memphis to Little Rock, and then from Little Rock on to Tulsa, spend the night in Tulsa, and then work there, and then drive from there on to Oklahoma City the next day, and the next morning early, and then I'd work there, and then I generally leave Oklahoma City and in the afternoon and of the second day, and then I'd drive all the way back to Memphis and get back to Memphis at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And so it was
a lot of road miles. A lot of road miles, a lot of driving.
Well, you know, I mean, you can see what I'm saying. Hell, I was gone a lot. I had a lot of irons in the fire, and
I remember in the 70s when I was here as a kid that you'd send pralines back from New Orleans when you go to New Orleans.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What were you going to New Orleans for?
We had an apartment in New Orleans. We leased down there in the quarter, mm-hmm. and we spent a lot of time down there because Jane didn't like that because that was part of Tulane and Newcomb, yeah. New Orleans was, and so we spent a good bit of time down there, and of course I'd use it to entertain people too, mm-hmm. and but that was the deal. We had this house that we bought, and then we had that place in Jacksonville Beach, mm-hmm. and then we had the one over in Arkansas, mm-hmm. and we got rid of it and got the one down in New Orleans.
And eventually you just gave up the lease on that.
Huh?
And eventually you gave up the lease on the New Orleans place?
Oh yeah. Finally went through all that, and then but finally got to the place that we were both getting older, and Jane didn't like be out that gone, so the last year I spent all my time here at home with Jane, because she was already, we were both 89 years old, and so we spent the last year basically around here, and mm-hmm. anything that I was doing that I still could do, I could do on the telephone without having to do any traveling, so I needed to be with her, and I was, and but that's, then she died here, 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.